This unit, we will be learning about all the different types of tissues that make up the body. This podcast focuses on one type of tissues, epithelial tissues. You can refer to epithelial tissues as also epithelium. And for this podcast, we're going to talk about the different characteristics of epithelial tissues as well as the different types. First, some general characteristics of epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissues are continuous sheets of cells. So when you think about them, think of linings and coverings. What I mean by that is think of the linings of the cavities of your body or things covering the surface of your body. So think of long continuous sheets. They are joined together by something called cell junctions. These cell junctions can either be watertight or semi-permeable. Watertight would mean it does not allow anything to pass through, and semi-permeable means that things could be able to diffuse across. Next, if you look at the images, you can see that each of these epithelial tissues have what's called an apical surface or a free edge. This is the part of the epithelial tissue that is touching open space. So this could be on the exterior of our body, or it could be in the cavity of an internal organ, but this is kind of like where the epithelial tissue ends and open space begins. The next feature of an epithelial tissue is that they all have what's called a basement membrane. A basement membrane is what provides support and foundation. Think about the basement of your house. This is the bottom or the base that's holding your house together. So again, this is like the foundation, the base, or the bottom of the epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissues have no blood supply, no direct blood supply. So the only way they can get nutrients is that they depend on diffusion from the cells below them. And then the last characteristic of an epithelial cells is that they can regenerate. This regeneration process replaces dead or damaged epithelial cells. This replacement does slow down with age. It's fastest in young and healthy individuals. For most of the epithelial tissues, there is a two-name naming system. The first part of the name indicates how many layers make up the epithelial tissue. So some epithelial tissues have the name simple in it. Simple means one layer. If you look at that image, this is an example of a simple epithelial tissue in which only contains one layer. Next, some epithelial tissues are what's called stratified. Stratified means many layers. If you look at the image, you can see that this tissue is stratified, which means it's composed of many layers of cells stacked upon each other. The second part of epithelial tissue's names is the shape of the cell. We could have squamous-shaped cells. These are flat or disc-like, pancake-like shaped cells. You could have what's called cuboidal-shaped cells. Cuboidal cells look like little cubes, so it's cubed-shaped. And then columnar is the final one. Columnar cells look like little columns, so they're column-shaped. Now we are going to go on to talking about the different types of epithelial tissues that we're going to be learning about. If you have flashcards available, you want to have your flashcards available now. The pictures in the bottom right of all of the slides will show you the images on your flashcards. And then I always recommend writing on the back of the flashcards. If you don't have flashcards available, you could also download these notes in Notability and follow along. The first type of epithelial tissue we'll discuss is called simple squamous. As the name indicates, is a one layer of flat squamous-shaped cells. If you look at the image, here is your one single layer of squamous-shaped cells. The function of simple squamous is filtration or exchange of substances by diffusion. Because it is such a thin tissue. It is great for diffusion. It's very easy for things to diffuse in and out of it. So where is this located? Well, think about places of your body that you'd want diffusion to happen. The air sacs of your lungs are composed of simple squamous, very thin layers of those flat like pancake cells, because oxygen and carbon dioxide are continuously diffusing back and forth across the membranes of the air sacs or alveoli of your lungs. Also in your mouth, but specifically, we're talking about under your tongue in this case. Under your tongue, there are simple squamous cells. If you've ever heard of placing a pill under your tongue, for example, if somebody's having a heart attack, that is a really quick way of getting the medicine into the system because of those simple squamous cells. It's a lot faster than swallowing the pill, having it go through your digestive system to your intestines, and then into your blood that way. And then the next place we would have simple squamous would be the walls of your capillaries. The walls of your capillaries are simple squamous because, again, diffusion is super important in your capillaries. That's where everything is diffusing in and out, all the cells of your bodies through your capillaries. We'll also be looking at images of slides in this unit. This is a cross-section of air sacs of the lungs. So you can see the simple squamous cells that are lining the outsides of those air sacs. Those are simple squamous, one single layer of those flat pancake-like cells. All right, next we will discuss simple cuboidal. Simple cuboidal, simple meaning one layer, cuboidal, cubed shaped cells. You can see in the image that there's one single layer of these cube-shaped cells. These cells, or this tissue, functions to secrete and absorb things. So these are located in glands of our body, specifically the ducts of the body. This is where the secretion is taking place. Our kidney tubules, our salivary glands, which secrete saliva. It is the simple cuboidal tissue that makes up those salivary glands that allows for the secretion of saliva, and your pancreas, which secretes insulin. If we look at the image, I'm just going to circle or highlight one of these circles you see in that image. I want you to picture this. This is like a cross section of a duct or a tubule within your body. And around the outside, you should see these cube-shaped cells that are going to help with secretion and absorption. Next, we're going to discuss simple columnar. So simple meaning one layer, and columnar, column-shaped cells. If you look at the image of the drawing, you can see that all of these are a single layer of column-shaped cells. And if you're looking in that picture and you kind of see almost like a loop of simple columnar tissue, that's because we're looking at an image of the intestines. So if you think about the intestines kind of folding and looping through abdominal pelvic cavity, that's what you're looking at there. So what do simple columnar tissues do? They secrete and absorb just like simple cuboidal, but they have one additional feature. They contain goblet cells, which secrete mucus. So if you think about your digestive tract, your large intestine, we want that mucus there to help to make our food glide through our digestive tract. So that mucus helps, and then secretion and absorption of the nutrients of our food is also really important. If you look at the slide, you can see a very similar image to the picture. All of these column-like cells that are lining the walls of your intestines. All right, next we have pseudostratified ciliated columnar. So that's a big name. Let's break that down a little. Columnar meaning column-shaped cells. So if you look at the drawing, you can see some of those column-shaped cells there. And then pseudostratified. Pseudo, the prefix pseudo, typically means fake. So these are fake stratified, which means they aren't really stratified, even though it looks like it. So if you look in the image again, it kind of looks like there's layers of columnar cells, but in fact that's not true. They are all individually attached to that basement membrane. So that's why it's called pseudostratified, because it kind of looks like it, but it's not. And then cilia, because of the presence of this cilia, these tiny hairs on the apical edge of this tissue, makes it ciliated. So that's why the name pseudostratified ciliated columnar. So the function of this is to trap dust and debris, and the cilia helps to propel it upwards. So this is located in our respiratory passages. Really important to keep our lungs clear and clean and free from any pollutants that we might breathe in. That's what that cilia is for. Also, because they're columnar cells, they have goblet cells that help to produce mucus, which also helps to protect us by trapping particles, and then we can cough them up so it doesn't get into our lungs. If you look at the image of the slide, you can see those cilia there on the apical edge and the pseudo-stratified columnar cells as well. All right, next we have stratified squamous. So stratified squamous, we are looking at many layers of flat-like pancake squamous-shaped cells. So first start by identifying the apical edge here, the free edge, and you can see those squamous-shaped cells. And then if you follow it down deeper in, you could see there's many layers of those squamous-shaped cells. As you get towards the basement membrane, the bottom here, they don't necessarily look squamous shaped, but it's all about the shape of the cells by the apical edge. So where are these located? The function of these is to protect from abuse or friction. Stratified squamous are great for places that have a lot of abuse or friction because they're very tough. All of those layers make that tissue a really tough tissue, very good to protect us from. Also, those squamous cells are really easy to make, so we can replace them much easier than we can like cuboidal or columnar cells. So an example of where this is, the skin, is stratified squamous. So if you think about just scratching your skin, right, we just lost a bunch of squamous cells when we did that, but we have so many more layers of them underneath, so it's okay, and we can replace them really easily. The sides of your mouth, think of the abuse that takes when you're chewing and eating. And your esophagus, which is the food that brings, or the tube that brings food to your stomach, also takes a lot of abuse. So it's great that it's made of stratified squamous to take that abuse and protect us from it. If you look at the image, you can see all of those layers of the squamous shaped cells. And you can also really nicely see that basement membrane too that I'm kind of highlighting in green. So you can see that as well. Okay, and the final epithelial tissue we'll talk about is called transitional. Transitional, you'll notice, doesn't fall under that two-name naming system because it's a little bit different than the other ones. You can see in the image, it doesn't follow any of the typical shapes. They're kind of almost blob-like looking cells. And what's special about transitional tissue is that it can slide or stretch. So if you think about where in your body you would want to be able to stretch, your urinary tract and your bladder. So your bladder is made of transitional tissue, which means it can stretch and then accommodate all that urine and then shrink back to its normal size. And it can keep doing that. If we look at the slide, you can see those blob-like cells. Thank you for watching this podcast on Learning Target 2, Epithelial Tissues. Now would be a great time to go to Quizlet and practice some of these words and pictures you just learned.